of radio justice in Tamale by angry youth of the area. The youth of Lamashegu in Tamale besieged the radio station demanding that a new patriotic party representative on the morning show discussion be handed over after he said to have accused some weed smokers in the town of murdering one Mustafa Abdul Rashid Monday night at Abobo. 3 people have been arrested by the Tamale police for their alleged involvement in the torching of properties at Radio Justice in Tamale. We're joined over the telephone by ASP Ebenezer Tete, and we'll get a quick update on the situation. Hello, ASP.
Yes, sir.
ASP Tete, thanks for joining us on News Desk.
You are welcome.
You have arrested 3 persons. Have you officially charged them?
Yes, yesterday we arrested 3 people in connection with what happened at Radio Justice, and investigations are ongoing. We've gotten to a stage of the investigation where they have since been granted police inquiry bail. They have to report this morning at the police station to assist us in further investigation. So that is where we are gotten to.
Okay, so what does this mean? They haven't been officially charged?
No, they have not been officially charged yet.
I see. Let's get into general security in the neighborhood of Radio Justice. Residents around the radio station are still living in fear and panic. What do you have to say about that?
I don't know of any resident who is complaining that is living in fear and panic. Yesterday and today, our presence is still at the radio station. We have men who were sent there yesterday to provide security and to ensure that the property is not attacked again. This morning we are continuing with the patrol that we started yesterday in the evening, and we continue throughout the night. And this have engendered a lot of confidence in the people, and people are going about their duties freely in the metropolis.
So then, from what you're telling me, I could say that there is no police visibility at the moment in the area.
There's police visibility at the moment in the area. That is why the radio station earlier on, people were saying that the whole facility has been bent down. As we speak now, Justice FM is on air and they are broadcasting. So let me clear that particular misconception that was created earlier on by people. What I would like to report is that there was some distraction at the place, and some cars were bent, some motorbikes were bent, and then the offices of financial service, that is Bayport Financial Service, was also ransacked. So that is what we can say.
Right, but in Tamale, we've seen 2 deaths in a space of 2 weeks. What are the readings the police is making into this?
Those 2 deaths we are still investigating, and we are yet to get to the bottom of the matter. Which
the police see these deaths as a pattern, or perhaps they're just isolated cases?
These are isolated cases. These are purely criminal matters that have happened, and we are looking at it from a criminal point of view.
How safe is Tamale?
Tamale is safe for any law-abiding citizen, and those who are bent on committing further troubles are those who will be going around saying that there's fear and panic in the area. Because if you don't have any cause to commit further trouble, then the security forces will not come after you. So what I can tell you is that Tamale is very safe.
So what headway have you made with the murders that would reassure that indeed Tamale is safe?
The question again?
I'm asking what headway you have made with investigating the murders.
You see, I don't want to be discussing our investigation on air. I'm telling you that this is a matter that we are still looking into, and when we make major breakthroughs, I will let you know. But we don't want to discuss every step of the investigation on radio or TV, because that will be giving a lot of our ammunition out there in the public. So I want to keep what we are doing by way of investigation very, very close to our chest. And then when we get to the bottom of it, when the people are being arraigned before court, I'll let you know that.
When will that be?
That will be after key suspects in the murder cases are arrested and they are being processed for court.
Key suspects in the murder case?
Yes, those two murder cases that happened. The one that happened on Saturday and the one that happened on Monday.
We do not have any suspects yet.
No arrests have been made. That's why I'm telling you that, yes.
Very well. I was just trying to get that right. But let's come back to the Tamale issue. How did you arrest these 3 persons who you've now given a police inquiry bail?
How did we arrest them?
Yes. How did you identify these persons?
They were arrested among the group of youth who went to the place to commit that particular atrocious act.
I see. We'll leave it here for now. Thank you very much, ASP. ASP Ebenezer Tete is the Northern Regional Police PRO, and he joined us in the case of attack on the Tamale-based Radio Justice. But let's talk to Gerard Ankra, who is president of the Ghana Independent Broadcasters Association. Hello, Gerald.
Hello.
Thanks for joining us on News Desk, Gerald. But how does this Tamale attack come to you?
Well, first and foremost, let me say I'm the executive director. We have a president. I'm the executive director of the association.
Very well.
Okay. Now coming back to the issue, I read about it in the newspapers. We've not had a formal report from our member yet. So when it is received, we will pick it up. But I believe this is not the first, and this is not the last of attacks on radio stations for that matter. If I recall, within the past year or so, there's been about not less than 5 or 7 attacks on radio stations that we've had to intervene by way of calling the police headquarters to talk to somebody, to have the district or regional commanders take action. And so it's a worrying sign that we are not happy about.
But Gerald, if Radio Justice comes to Giba, what then does Giba do? If Radio Justice files a complaint, is that it?
Yes. You have to write formally to us, and then the council will take it up.
Absolutely. What do you do in taking it up?
Now, the issue is that we apart from the council taking action, what we do is to communicate with the police headquarters to find out what particularly has happened and for them to do thorough investigations on that.
I see. But like you said, this is not the first time we are having attacks on a radio station or a broadcast house. Going forward, what should we take note of as broadcasters ourselves as well?
I believe certain measures have to be taken by each member station, and for that, and what I mean by that is, at least if we can apply for police protection for some media houses, because it is becoming obvious that certain sections of our society take such things as a matter of course. You know, they can only attack media houses when they are not happy with what is being put on air. And for that reason, we must also take precautionary action to preempt or prevent such attacks.
So Gerald, it comes down to how we control what people say. So say you are a radio show host. So how does the radio station control what people say? Is it even possible?
Well, it is not impossible, but it is most difficult to sometimes, when you are having live situations like that, to control what people say. But it's always been something we always educate the host or program directors to always have to be mindful of. In that, when anything is said on air that is not acceptable, quickly ask whoever did that presentation to withdraw it going forward. And for that reason, for that matter, and show hosts to actually control the programs that they have. And so that is another issue that we should quickly bring to our members' attention.
So considering it's impossible to anticipate or to know what someone is going to say in the next seconds, which could be volatile or not, it brings us to the conversation of delayed broadcast, doesn't it?
Well, this issue has come up at various fora that we had over the past few years. And this delayed broadcast, I remember years ago, about 3 or 4 years ago, some equipment were donated to some members. But I guess over the period, they've all stopped using these delayed equipment, and for various reasons. And for that reason, then it comes back to us that if we stop using the delayed broadcast equipment, what then do we do as show hosts to ensure that we don't become volatile on our shows? And these are the issues we want all our members to be mindful of. At least, though that there will be certain statements made that are unpalatable, I believe it does not lie in anybody else's hands to also attack a station or attack any member for any for any statement that is unacceptable. I don't think it lies within anybody's hands to do that, and that is the issue we also have to address as a society.
But does GIBA have sanctions against members who do not do this, members who keep the airwaves very volatile? Yes,
we have sanctions for them. I remember in 2012 we came out with this code of conduct. It applied during the elections, but we extended it over the years. And then also, but you see, what happens is this is a spontaneous reaction to something. Now, so what we have to do is to request, after the report is made, we request the member involved to give us a recording. We go through it and then we assess it. And then we take necessary actions as it were. But again, if such remarks are made, whether on air or not, there are various means by which these such things can be redressed. We talked about rejoinder, we talked about other issues in the code. And for that reason, attacks should not be something that we should even consider at all. This is what we want to push to our society as a whole.
I see we'll leave it here for now, Gerald. Gerald Ankara is Executive Director for the Ghana Independent Broadcasters Association, and we've been talking about the attack on Tamale-based radio station Justice. But one thing is clear, as much as you expect the broadcaster to be circumspect or to have control of his or her show, you as a person too, there are other ways of seeking redress besides attack on the broadcaster. You're watching News Desk. I'll be right back. When I return, we'll deal with other matters, other critically important matters. Don't go away. I'm glad you stayed on News Desk. Let's talk our prisons now. And the Ghana Prison Service has rejected aspects of the latest United Nations report describing conditions in the country's prisons as below acceptable standards, explaining that the UN requirements of prisons cannot be easily met in a third world country like Ghana. Public Relations Officer of the Ghana Prisons, Vitalis IE, however, noted efforts are currently underway to holistically address challenges, including those highlighted by the report. And we'll discuss this over the next few minutes. I have with me in the studio Dennis Amma. He is president of the Human Rights Advocate at African Heights Foundation. I believe I got that right. Yes. Right. So Dennis, listen, I mean, if you take what I have just read, we can't meet the UN standards because we're a third world country. What interpretation do you make of it?
Well, the international standards are not standards of the first world countries. They are standards of the international community as a whole. And various countries, including Ghana, accept these standards. These are not standards which are imposed. And in fact, even in some first world countries, you also realize that standards can be poor and quite brutish. So it is more about the will to have the best standards in your prisons. And the best standards are not to turn prisons into luxury homes, but just to make sure that they are places fit for human habitation. And the truth is that if you visit our prisons, conditions are quite poor. And it seems that we have not gone beyond that mindset of the prisons having the only role of extreme punishment and destruction of the person. And that is not acceptable in our current situation as a democratic country. And also it is not sensible economically, because apart from a few limited offenses, most prisoners would be released back into society. So if they actually emerge from the prisons worse than they went in, that in the end does not benefit society as a whole. We actually suffer more for that. And there's nothing you can do about the limits of punishment, custodial sentences for offenses. So it is best that you ensure that in the prisons, people can have conditions which will promote their development as human beings, so that they don't come back more dangerous to society, or they don't come back completely destroyed and useless to their families and dependent for the rest of their lives. And our prisons do have some very harsh conditions that I have witnessed myself. And it is necessary that the recommendations that were made by the UN in this report are taken seriously.
Let's look at our prisons and the fact that let us draw the line. Having the resource and actually meeting those recommendations or the UN chapter. How do you handle that? We live in a country where indeed we do not have the resource. How do we meet those?
Some of these standards are actually meant to cater for the limited resources. So for example, if you have limited resources, you are supposed to take remand prisoners, the issue of remand prisoners, very serious. And if you go to our main security prison at Nsawam, you find out that quite a huge percentage of the population are remand prisoners who are not supposed to be there, or who are supposed to be facing trial and transferred to another position. And the UN report, for example, suggests that custody of remand prisoners should be moved away from the police service to the prison service, because while the prison service holds them, they are still under the responsibility of the police service. So the prison officers can do nothing about their stay in the prisons. And if you ask them, they are quite futile about it. They think there is nothing that they can do unless the police officer who is in charge of investigation comes for that remand prisoner and takes him for trial.
But is there something they can do?
Yes, it's just a matter of transferring responsibility legally to the prison service, so that the prison officers who hold them there would have to ensure that they don't stay there for as longer than their warrants actually expect them to stay. So for example, if there are cases where police officers who are in charge of the investigation are transferred and nobody takes care of the docket of the prisoner, so the prisoner remains there, and when you go there they rush to the bars trying to give you messages you can't deliver, because many of them may be abandoned, some may be foreigners, some their families may not even be aware that they are in prison custody. And so just transferring responsibility from the police service to the prison service does not cost any money. You understand? And indeed, having the remand prisoners processed expeditiously would save us money.
What would it take to do that legal transfer?
It's just an act of parliament which can do that. Or you could even have it in regulations which can do that. And other issues like the imposition of custodial sentences for most offenses is quite outmoded today. In many communities, you need some form of labor. Communal labor is not at the level that it used to be. You have people in responsibility in those communities. You have government structures in every district. They can be made to do some communal work rather than being kept in the prisons and fed and degraded in those conditions when they can be useful to society. And indeed, there are some offenses. The report specifically suggests that for women, for example, it is better to give them such responsibilities than to take them, because they are often not a violent threat to the rest of society to the extent that they must be kept away in some detention somewhere.
And it is better to give them non-custodial sentences.
Exactly.
But do we have the system for non-custodial sentences?
I think we do. We just need to legalize it and have a legal framework for it so that we see who is in charge of supervision. It could be a magistrate, it could be local government officials, it could even be opinion leaders in society and leaders in society. Like if you ask someone to do some work in the school, the headmaster can take care of that, and it's in his interest that the work is done. So it's quite easy to have such things done. And the other suggestions, such as having open farm camps instead of the seclusion of the prisons for those who are less dangerous, to be working on those farms, which would also be secured.
I think they have a system like that already. It's not widespread.
Yes.
But they do have a system
They
like
usually take them out for some labor and return them to the prisons. But if the prisons are congested already, and all they do is to go and work outside and return to the prisons, that is not the most ideal conditions. You could actually have large farms which would have facilities for their residents so that they stay in the farms as well.
I see. Let's look at some of the human rights that are being abused in our prisons. Share that with us.
One of the major issues that the report highlights is the delegation of disciplinary responsibilities to other prison inmates, which the report characterizes as being corrupt and abusive, because the idea is that these people are there for criminal offenses, and then you put them over their peers in the prisons, and often it leads to a lot of abuse and a lot of torture in the prisons.
Is it wrong to do that?
Yes, it's wrong. The prison officers, yes, the prison officers are supposed to take responsibility for discipline in the prisons. And the Prisons Act, which was actually passed under the military regime, under the NRC, actually provides in section 25 that prison officers are prohibited from maltreating or oppressing prisoners. And so if you delegate it, sometimes you don't know if that is the idea, that if they feel if they delegate it to someone else to do it, then they cannot be held responsible for it. But legally, they are still responsible.
Let's figure this out again. Let's try and get a better understanding. When a prison officer chooses a leader to, say, oversee an aggregate of some of these prisoners, is wrong.
Yes, especially when they have disciplinary responsibility, which often means that they inflict corporal punishment on their colleagues in the prisons. You could supervise, they could have supervisory responsibilities, but if there is a need for disciplinary action, it has to be done by the prison officers themselves.
So it's not wrong for some of the prisoners to be given supervisory roles as long as they are within the prisons. It's not wrong. But it's wrong when they have disciplinary duties as well.
Exactly,
right,
which often involve corporal punishment. Because if you've noted, even in the schools where teachers are trained, in training colleges, and they are not people with criminal records, there are very severe restrictions on the use of corporal punishment, even in schools. But somehow in the prisons, it's as if it's free for all, and people who have a criminal record are given responsibility to inflict, often violent criminal record, to inflict such corporal punishment on their colleagues, which may result in very serious injuries when you don't have good hospital care facilities in the prisons. You are only escalating your cost of maintaining the prisoners instead of having the prison officers who have been trained to have that responsibility of discipline in the prisons.
Which other rights are being violated besides the torture? Which other rights are being violated?
Torture affects the right to dignity, and also you have the poor sanitary conditions, which ends up affecting their health and also their nutrition in the prisons, which is something which is highlighted. If you see the conditions under which they are fed, the meals they are given, it's definitely an affront to their development and to their dignity also. So because a lot of the rights of prisoners are already restricted by law, most of the rights that we may take for granted, they don't have those rights. So when it comes to inflicting pain and violence on them, that is a very serious matter, because already in the environment of a prison, people are psychologically vulnerable. There are other suggestions they make, which coincidentally have been made by a Constitutional Review Commission as well, that we should have an independent legal aid commission which would be in charge of representing prisoners who are unable to afford lawyers, because you'd realize that is a serious problem that we have. And also legally also, our evidence decree states that
The legal aid should be different from the justice for all system.
The justice for all system is perhaps a model that can be developed, but there is a legal aid system which represents people right from the start. They don't need to be in prisons before, so that they don't even get to prison and escalate the cost of maintaining prisoners. So you can have a legal aid system, but right now it is still under the government's control, and that means people may not trust the system. You can set up an independent commission which is in charge of that, so that prisoners would be made, it would promote its functions, prisoners would be more trusting of the legal aid system and utilize it so that those who do not deserve to go to prison do not end up there. I was also referring to the use of evidence which is obtained under torture, which happens both in police cells and also in the prisons. And our Evidence Act states that all relevant evidence is admissible, which means that the police can extract evidence under such conditions. And the experience in the legal system is that often such evidence is not credible, because if you are torturing someone to admit to a crime, most likely they will admit to the crime, and that may not be the truth. And also it ends up torturing prisoners would also have the effect of, if the evidence they obtain is legal, then the police in investigations are encouraged indirectly to torture prisoners and obtain that evidence in order to bring closure to the cases that they have in their dockets.
What can we do about that?
It also requires, and the report specifically mentions, an amendment of a law. This is again a law which was passed from a military regime, and under such a system, most countries, including the UK, where we borrowed most of these laws from, have gone ahead to prohibit the use of torture. And Article 15 of the Convention Against Torture specifically imposes the responsibility on states to prohibit the use of evidence obtained under torture in court proceedings.
Does the country have an excuse to say, well, I do not have the resources, so it becomes okay for us to abuse our prisoners or convicts in our prisons because we don't have the resource?
Our constitution addresses issues like that, even though it's not done specifically in the context of prisons. In education, for example, what is expected is a progressive realization, and that concept is known to the international human rights system too. What is expected is that you have a progressive realization of the rights, especially socioeconomic rights, which may require some resources, so that you need to have a plan that we are going to be investing this amount in our prisons every year or in our budget allocation for improvement of services. But you cannot say that because you don't have sufficient resources, some section of the population completely should be deprived of their humanity because there are no resources.
I think that's what we forget, so that's the section of the population. And like you said, they come back into the society. They are not in prison forever. Well, some of them are, but most of them come back to the society.
Yes, and indeed there have been people who have come back to save their societies. Our own Kwame Nkrumah is an example. Nelson Mandela is an example. If those people had been brutalized extremely in prison and completely destabilized psychologically, the world would have lost the benefits of their humanity. And indeed they have come out to do wonderful things. And it's not just limited to these people. There are lots of people who have come out of prisons to do wonderful things for society. So it is best that society still regards them as human beings, and the little that can be done just to make them feel human enough should be done, without the limitation of resources being used as an excuse to completely derive them. The resources are not zero. It's not at zero. So if it's at 1, they should get 1/10. If it's at 2, they should get 2/10. But you can't allocate 0 to them and say you have limited resources.
That's where we live now, where the country is telling us that, well, we don't have the resource, so we can't provide adequately, if we are able to at all, for that section of the population. What can we do about it? Besides, we know that, yes, it's wrong, but then what?
The effort of the international community and civil society and the media also is to bring pressure to bear on government to stop using the limitation of resources as an excuse for doing nothing at all, because the limitation of resources is not the absence of resources. If it's limited, yes, we want to see limited support for these people. We don't want to see fabulous support for them. All we want to see is the limited support which reflects the resources that we have. And indeed you find out that there are some allocations which are in this country which are quite on the high side and on the luxurious side, but for some people you are told you can get nothing at all. They are also citizens, and the Supreme Court has ruled that they can actually vote, and it is because of some of these deprivation of their rights which resulted from them not having any say at all in society that motivated the general movement towards giving prisoners some limited rights in society as well.
Perhaps we should start looking at what the prison service uses the money it's given for, because I recall that in an interview with the service, I was told that indeed last year had been good because they got some money from government. It was better than years before. And so for us to go back to them and then they tell us that we don't have the resource, and so we can't provide for that population. How can we ensure that indeed whatever it is, like you said, the limited support they get from the government is used judiciously?
We have a Controller and Accountants General which monitors the use of resources which are allocated to public agencies, but I think the civil society and the media must also follow the use of such resources, so that if we are seeing an increase, we must see a corresponding improvement in the conditions in the prisons as well. And that is something that we can do more about. And such efforts, such as highlighting the cases of such reports, and it does no credit to the name of Ghana. We are used as an example to the rest of the continent. And there are places in Africa who have less resources than we do, but provide slightly better conditions than we do. And so we should aim at monitoring the use of such resources, and based on that, there can be the advocacy for the allocation of more resources when there's an improvement in the national cake as well for such people.
Right. And I mean, you look at our prisons, and what we want to do is build more prisons. Is that the best thing we can do?
Ideally, that's not the best situation, and we would expect that, especially when they are not handling the custody of people in the prisons very well. Half of the people in the prisons are not supposed to be there anyway. And so you don't need more prisons if you are going to manage the prisons that you have effectively, and also to be more creative about sentencing, which would require an amendment of our Criminal and Other Offences Act, so that you can have more creative imposition of sentences which are beneficial to society. And if you observe, the use of custodial sentences, detention, is not something which was really common in our traditional culture. There were ways in which you were made to pacify the victims of your offense. And these are ways that we can return to. We don't need to swallow hook, line, and sinker everything that was brought to us and completely ignore. There are ways that people can work to pacify the victims of their crimes. And most crimes have victims, so that you don't have too many people in the prisons who are not being useful to anybody and who are just being degraded. Sometimes the process of even being asked to work in pacification of the victims of your crimes has a way of reforming you. And there are wonderful stories of people who have been reformed by such services. So I think if we are going to look more creatively and think out of the box when it comes to prison service and see them more as correctional services, we are likely to have a depopulation of our prisons, which will then not necessitate the building of more prisons. But while we have this system of overcrowding, you really can't say that no building of prisons should go on.
But I think also I should mention the fact that the prison service recently has developed its system to some extent. It's introduced various forms of education within the system. But what we are bedeviled with is getting that limited resource to the prisons, and it trickling down to every prisoner in the prisons, because we have some of them right in the BEC, some of them right in WASI, some of them taking up vocational education, some of them taking up computer training, and I was telling you about the agric module as well. And you have all this, but you have a rapporteur come into your country and tell you that something is wrong. Why would they come into the country in the first place?
We are signatories to the international treaties which give them the right to come to this country and carry out such inspections, and the UN has rapporteurs for specific countries and also rapporteurs for some thematic areas. So it could be for prisons, for example, and so they can go around anywhere in the world. If a country is problematic, then you have a rapporteur in charge of that country. Our country has not been identified as being that problematic, so this report is not only targeting our country. There are reports which they issue on various countries as they travel around the world on their duties to ensure that countries are complying with their international obligations under those treaties. So it's not a specific targeting of Ghana. And indeed, as you mentioned, I visited the female department of Nsawam prisons, and conditions there are quite laudable compared to other places. There is vocational training, and there isn't much congestion in the prisons. It's a good example, and there are such good examples. But if we actually carry that model forward and stop using resources as an excuse, then we can actually have better, and sometimes there are donations outside which are specifically targeted at such areas. We should have libraries, we should have more comfortable places for study in the prisons so that many of them can aspire to something other than crime when they are released from the prisons. And in the prisons you have a lot of time. You have a lot of time to train yourself to be better. And so we should make use of that time. It should not only be held time. It should be a time for education, a time for learning a vocation, so that when people come out of the prisons, they can do something more useful with their lives. So yes, there are bright spots, but we need to improve those more, because the dark spots are more than the bright spots.
I wanted to end the conversation, but something just came to mind. Torture was one of the elements that the United Nations report thought was ongoing on a large scale in our prisons. In the event that an officer has a very uncompromising, let me put it that way, a very difficult prisoner to deal with, what is the appropriate way in dealing with such a prisoner?
Well, there are ways, the prison officers and the police officers are trained in ways of restraining people. And often the use of torture is not to restrain people, it's just to inflict pain on them or to get them to make a confession. So the use of torture is not a substitute for actually exerting control over the prisoners. The very setup of the prison as an institution is meant to exercise that control. And also there are weapons and tools which assist them to control the prisoners. So torture is not a substitute for that. And like I mentioned, our Prisons Act, our Prison Service Act prohibits prison officers carrying out torture. Our Constitution also under Article 15 prohibits the use of torture against any person at all, and actually specifically mentions whether arrested or detained, you cannot use torture on them.
So how does the prisons officer control that prisoner?
Well, usually they have sticks. If the prisoner is escaping, for example, which they can use to restrain them, usually they have handcuffs. That's an effective way of controlling prisoners. If a prisoner has his hands cuffed, there's nothing he can do to harm the prison officer. And you don't need torture for that. The handcuffs are designed for that purpose. So
because I'm thinking before you are able to get the cuffs on, there will be a scuffle of some sort.
Yeah, usually you may have more than one prison officer in charge of that. And so in the extreme cases where you may have such incidents, there are ways of controlling you. And even the use of corporal punishment is allowed under the Prison Service Act, but it's not supposed to go to the extent of torture.
All right, thank you very much, Dennis. It's been insightful talking to you. Dennis Amma is President, Human Rights Advocate, African Heights Foundation. We've been talking our prisons, how to improve it so we don't end up abusing that section of our population. You're watching News Desk. There's more ahead. Don't go away. Hello and welcome back to News Desk. And well, in issues we've been discussing already, if you just tuned in, we've dealt with the prison service and how we can improve the conditions in the prisons as far as that section of the population is concerned. We've also dealt with Tamale and how safe or volatile Tamale is. And we spoke to ASP Ebenezer Tete. ASP Ebenezer Tete reassured that indeed Tamale is safe. 3 persons have been arrested but have been given police inquiry bail in relation to the attack on the Tamale Bay's Radio Justice. However, no arrests have been made in relation to the 2 deaths recorded in 2 weeks in the area. And he says that indeed Tamale is safe. Let's get into something else. Perhaps we'll get into mining. And President John Dramani Mahama has asked mining companies to act responsibly in communities within which they operate. Speaking at a seminar on responsible mineral development initiative here in Accra, the president noted that it is regretful that some mining companies take their communities for granted and operate without regard for the welfare of their public. Let's take a listen.
There has been a new development in terms of what we call corporate social responsibility. In the past, the business of what happened in the communities next door, as I was describing a few minutes ago, did not concern the mining companies. Theirs was just to come and extract, pay their taxes, and then leave. Today, the philosophy of corporate social responsibility has caught on, and many mining companies realize that you cannot live in isolation to the communities that surround you. It should not be tokenism. In some cases, it's just done to show a certain sense of care, but it's not deep enough. And so we must establish guidelines for corporate social responsibility so that it really takes care of the critical needs of the society, and not something that is just done to be printed in brochures and circulated and saying that, oh, this company, you know, is a good corporate citizen.
Well, we are putting an effort to raise WACAM over the telephone. WACAM is Wasa Association of Communities Affected by Mining. We'll find out how those communities benefit from the mining companies. When we do, we'll bring back this matter. Meanwhile, I was asking you at the beginning of the program how Ghana must deal with its balloon and wage bill. Now, this stemmed from the Graphic Fidelity Economic Dialogue, where former Minister of State at the Finance Ministry, Dr. Anthony Akoto-Osei, mentioned about the single spine pay policy. He's asked government not to fully implement it because it's not sustainable. There's been the issue of retrenchment of workers. Here is the TUC's response. General Secretary of the TUC, Kofi Esamwa, says an important assessment of a real number of workers on government payroll must first be done before any talk of retrenchment. According to the TUC boards, engagement with relevant stakeholders, as was done at Whole last year, is key to resolving challenges facing the implementation of the single spine salary structure. Let's take a listen to him.
Generally, in labor relations, every aspect of issues involving the relationship between employer and employee are laid bare for discussion. So if for any reason government has the cause to think of the size of public sector workers, yes, it's an open thing that could be brought out for discussion. But I think it's important that government as an employer, before deciding to do anything, really do a proper assessment of whether we have more people than we very much require. If jobs are properly defined in the public sector and there is any reason to discuss those issues, there are issues for negotiation at each time. But for now, nothing has been laid before us. Right. With any justification as to, because if it's established that there are more workers in the public sector than we needed, and is followed up with an appropriate justification which is with all the social partners, yes, we'll discuss. Indeed, if we're talking about suspension of the single spine salary structure altogether, my basic question will be to then say that you suspend it and replace it with what? We can't operate in a vacuum. So if you say you are suspending implementation, you may end up creating more problems if you do not really engage social partners to look for what will be in place instead of suspension. My understanding of what he's saying is that there are implementation challenges. So some aspects of the implementation challenges should be suspended. These are all issues for engagement with the parties to the agreements to sit down and look out for which areas. And we have almost always been doing it since the implementation began. If you remember, we were all in hope and discussed the future of the single spine, and we concluded that the answer does not lie in suspension. The answer lies in the suspension, the management of the pay policy generally, and to look out for where things have not been done right and to be corrected. So it's not a new thing. It's just like restating the issues as it were. We acknowledge as Labour the implementation challenges, and we are hoping to really collectively find solution to the problems associated with it, particularly in the issue of the wage bill. It's normally raised without any appropriate issues to substantiate really that the excess is coming from here. And if you recall, Labour asked that let's all delve deeper into figures and find out what is the real cost of the implementation of the policy. And will be otherwise figures are being thrown here and there. Sometimes they say 70, sometimes they say 50. We need to establish what exactly.
That's all time will allow for us to do on News Desk today. Unfortunately, we can't discuss this matter further. But I'll end with some of your messages. This one is in relation to the attack on Radio Justice. And Abdul Rahman Fusaina says the police should do their best to as well arrest those who murdered Abdul Rashid on Monday, which led to the angry crowd attacking the radio station. Meanwhile, Abbas Adama says the police should be blamed for this barbaric act because he was listening to one of the FM stations in Tamale. I really don't get this one, Abbas. Ifriye Nathaniel says Ghana police should fight as possible to arrest them so that they face the law, because this has become very rampant in the country. I believe you're doing their best. Ricky Epiphany doesn't have a decent language, so I won't read it. Papa Shaker says, do these people think Ghana is their property? Are they the only people living in it? Bonty Benjamin says, I pray the law will deal with them without fear or favor. And I'll end with Adam Zaki, who says, much as we will blame those who burnt the station, we should equally blame the station too for discussing the murder of the guy on the same, referring to Abdul Rashid, on the same day that he was killed. Adam, thank you very much for your messages, everyone who sent in messages. But I have to go now, and thanks for staying through the hour. My name is Kemini Nyamani Amano. But I understand I have to do this just before I go. Unfortunately, only after I had mentioned my name, I was told. But the ministry is organizing a stakeholder consultation on the performance of the communications sector with a view to developing collective understanding of policy perspectives for implementation. Now, this has been called a Digital Family Forum and is the realization of the common interest of stakeholders involving government, regulators, communication service providers, civil society in promoting the continuing development of the sector to satisfy expectation. It's underway at the Accra International Conference Center. Stay on, we bring you a live feed.